House Democratic Caucus who are here. Not all the members here who will be speaking today. We have Representative Jean Wu. We have Representative Cheryl Cole, Representative Aaron Zwiener, Representative Ron Reynolds, the first Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Tony Rose, Representative Carl Sherman, Representative Vicki Goodwin, Representative Ann Johnson, Representative Jarvis Johnson, Representative Julie Johnson, Dr. Alma Allen from Houston, our House Democratic Whip, Representative John Busey, and that same member of the House Elections Committee, Representative Jessica Gonzalez, who I'll introduce more formally here in just a moment, Representative Marianne Perez, Representative Sergio Munoz, Representative Christina Morales, and Chairwoman Nicole Collier of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, who you'll also hear from in a few moments. And we're so honored today to be joined by two of our strongest champions in our nation's capital, people who have fought day in and day out their entire careers for more opportunity, for better health care, for better education, for good jobs, and yes, for the right to vote. To Congressman Lloyd Doggett and Congressman Joaquin Castro, we're so honored to have them with us today, and you'll be hearing from them in a few moments. So, make no mistake, House Bill 6, Senate Bill 7, both these bills are vote suppression bills. They are intended to make it harder for Texans to cast a ballot. And this is in spite of the fact that the Texas Republican Secretary of State's office has said the 2020 election was safe, was secure, was smooth, despite the fact that Governor Greg Abbott, when asked a few weeks ago as he was promoting these vote suppression bills, he was asked, "Governor, was there fraud in the 2020 elections?" He said, "Well, I can't think of any. I don't know of any, but there may have been." That's not good enough to bring as a reason to bring vote suppression bills to the Texas Capitol. We know that shamefully Texas has a long and dark history of systematically disenfranchising and suppressing the votes of African American and Hispanic Texans. And as our community, as our state becomes more diverse and continues to grow, and that growth is fueled by the tremendous growth in communities of color, the Hispanic community, the African American community, yes, the Asian American community as well. These bills are all the more offensive for that reason. And I will tell you today that the 67 members of the House Democratic Caucus, we come from all over this state, from Beaumont to El Paso, from the Valley to North Texas, and we stand united in opposition to any attempts to make it more difficult for our constituents to vote. Texas already has some of the worst voter suppression laws in the country. We make it hard to vote. We make it hard to register to vote. Texas makes it hard to register other people to vote. And that's what's wrong in Texas today. Those are the issues we should be addressing in the Texas legislature, not new attempts to make it harder to vote, not new attempts to make it harder to register to vote, and not new ways to make it easier to harass and intimidate voters and election workers at the polls. And so those are the things you'll see Democrats on the House floor today talking about, fighting against, and the principles we'll be standing for. And so with that, it is my privilege to introduce the Vice Chair of the House Elections Committee, Representative Jessica Gonzalez, who for the last several months, this entire session, along with Representative Busey, Representative Fierro, and Representative Beckley, have fought day in and day out every time this Elections Committee has met against House Bill 6, against SB 7, and numerous other vote suppression bills. We're thankful for her leadership. We're grateful for her leadership. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jessica Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, as a woman of color who has worked in the Department of Justice, working on these issues, and for someone who led the charge on the voter protection efforts in Nevada in 2012, I know what discrimination looks like, and this is, and HB 6 is just that. It's old Jim Crow dressed up in what Republicans are calling election integrity. What we can't deny is Texas's history, long history, of using racially gerrymandered legislature and blatant attempts to pass legislation that is aimed and has the effect of disenfranchising people of color. Yet here we are again. And this happens every session, but this is by far one of the worst pieces of legislation that Texas has seen. And I won't go into all the dangerous provisions of HB 6, but I will say that after 20 plus hours of testimony, of people testifying about the dangerous effect that this bill will have on Texan voters, this bill was still rammed through committee, and we're still being forced to hear it despite the outcries from the public about not wanting a legislation like this to pass in Texas. You know, we're Texans, we take pride in our state, we take pride in who we are, where we come from, and we must do better than this. We have to do better than this. I know that as Democrats, we're going to fight with every breath today to make sure that nobody's voice is silenced at the ballot box. And if this bill passes and becomes law in the state of Texas, it will be a very, very dark day in Texas. And so we're hoping to have that debate. We're hoping to change some minds, you know, and hopefully minimize the damage that this bill will cause. And if we have to go all night, that's what we have to do. We're going to fight really hard to make sure that no one's voice is ever silenced here in Texas. And so thank you, and I will pass it back to, or who am I? Oh, sorry. Chair Nicole Collett.
Thank you, Representative Vice Chair Gonzalez. You know, they say everything is bigger in Texas. That couldn't be even more true about the way Texas has repeatedly attempted to disenfranchise people of color and suppress our votes. From the long ago time of black code laws that birthed the Jim Crow era, where we saw literacy tests implemented before you could vote that excluded white people under the guise of a grandfather clause because they could vote before. We saw poll taxes required. You had to pay to play with voting. To gerrymandering. HB 6 is no different. Senate Bill 7 is no different. It's another attempt to disenfranchise and make it harder for people to vote. It empowers those same poll workers who were originally created to intimidate people of color voters. It empowers them to encourage them to deter voters. This is not about bringing more people to the polls. This is not about protecting the polls. It's to keep you away from the polls. We already do that now. We have one of the most strictest measures in place, Texas does, when it comes down to providing voting integrity, when it comes down to voting regulations. We already have voter ID. I don't know what else they want other than my blood. So today, we will stand against HB 6, SB 7, because they are remnants of the past. And we don't want to go back to the past. We want to move forward. We must move forward, and we must be inclusive of everyone in this state and allow them to exercise their right and not be criminalized under HB 6 or SB 7 for minor mistakes. Minor mistakes. We don't want to see these criminalized. We talk about criminal justice reform. This is not reform. These are penalties for people who attempt to exercise their right to vote. So we will stand with the voters and be their voice today and talk against this bill. We will work this bill hard to make sure that we make it better or try to take it down for the people of Texas. And we stand united as Democrats. And we thank everybody for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Nicole Collier, Chair of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus, for your leadership and your words. Next, we'll bring up Congressman Lloyd Doggett, and followed by Congressman Joaquin Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. You know, lasting success cannot be built on blocking access, but it's understandable that Republicans who've gone soft on sedition, soft on political violence, soft on lies, and soft on fantasies rely on suppression in an attempt to cling to power. We favor turning out the votes, not throwing out the voters. I'm here, first of all, just to honor the courage and the tenacity of each of these state representatives. They keep telling Texans the truth about what is happening in this beautiful building. It is an ugly truth. While there is so much competition this year for the worst bill, certainly House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7 are the ugliest. You can't scrub off the ugly with a steel brush. Not even a Trump bleach injection could clean up these bills. Ugly. Ugly because they go to the heart of our democracy. What sports team attempts to win by blocking the opposition from coming on the playing field or the basketball court? I'll answer my own question. Losers. Republicans are so very fearful of the strength of empowered Texans voting that they are desperately attempting to add even more tools to their overloaded voter suppression toolbox. Texas is already ground zero for voter suppression. One recent study found that our state was the most difficult place to vote in the entire nation. But based on the record turnout of Texans last year to overcome those obstacles, what is the Republican response? We haven't made it difficult enough. They now seek to erect these outrageous, destructive barriers. It's as if they conceive this legislation by posing the phony question, how can we do even more to keep Texans of color away from the voting booth? These bills are the sorry answer to that question. So to protect every Texan and to protect the heartbeat of our democracy, every neighbor, every business needs to speak out. I salute almost 50 businesses that have spoken out against this suppression. They know that suppression doesn't create a stable business environment, but we need more. Silence isn't an option here. You either condone suppression or you stand up for democracy. State Republican leaders here in Texas appear like their friends in Georgia and Florida to just be begging for us to take federal action. They're showing the importance of having uniform national standards like the For the People Act. History is watching what's happening here in this Texas Capitol today, our allies and certainly our adversaries. Let's preserve our precious but all too precarious democracy by honoring above all the voice of the people expressed in fair and free elections. Few people have done more to achieve that, and few have been stronger in advocating for Texas than my friend and colleague Joaquin Castro.
Thank you, Congressman Doggett. It's wonderful to be here with my colleague, Congressman Doggett, who's been a champion on so many of these issues for so long, and also with the incredible state representatives, and I know in the other chamber, the state senators who have been fighting some of the most extreme legislation in the country this session. If you think about it, over the last few years, elections in Texas have actually gotten more competitive between the two parties. Yet Republicans in the 2021 session have gotten more extreme, have moved to the extreme far right that's unrepresentative of the people of Texas. They're led by a party chairman in Allen West, who moved here from Florida just a few years ago, who is perhaps the most extreme of the party chairs in Texas and across the nation. I'm talking about bills like the so-called constitutional carry bill that would allow anybody to have a gun, anybody to take a gun anywhere and not have to have a permit. We don't know who they are, what their background is. Most Texans strongly disagree with that legislation. The most restrictive abortion measures in the country that would infringe on a woman's right to choose. And Texas already has among the most restrictive voting rights measures, the ability for somebody to go to the polls and vote. And the response to more competitive elections in Texas by the Republican Party has been to try to stop people who disagree with them from voting by Republicans. Their answer is not to make voting easier. It's not to take Texas from ranking almost dead last in voter participation in the country and opening up the voting process, welcoming more Texans in to vote. Their answer is to hang on to power by stopping people from voting. Their strategy is not good governance. It's not great ideas anymore. Their strategy, Texans, is to keep you from voting. That's the Republican Party in Texas today, and quite honestly, it's the Republican Party across the country. And so we wanted to be here today to send a message to the folks in the chamber here and also to Texans that this is their chance to speak up. The Republican Party, Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, Ken Paxton, who complains about voter fraud but is under indictment himself for fraud, they're trying to make it harder right now. They're on the cusp of making it harder for every single Texan to vote. Even though, as folks mentioned, when they're asked for proof of widespread voter fraud, they can't provide any. They can't point to any instance of widespread voter fraud. You think about how incredible that is, that they would propagate these pieces of legislation without any proof at all. And so, if we're going to stop this bill from becoming law, Texans need to speak up now. Our business community needs to join the 75 Texas businesses or so that recently spoke up against this voter suppression legislation. We don't want to happen in Texas what happened in Georgia not too long ago, which is not only going to threaten the right of people to be able to go vote, but also going to cost our state economically. So please, I hope all Texans will speak up now. And now I want to introduce a gentleman who has shepherded the Democratic Party in its comeback years for a few terms now, and is doing a wonderful job as chairman of the party, native of Brownsville, Texas, Hilberto Hinojosa. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, let me thank Chairman Chris Turner for his leadership in trying to block this terrible legislation. But I especially want to thank Representative Jessica Gonzalez for her leadership on the Elections Committee and all the hard work she's done and bringing transparency to these proceedings that the Republicans have so hard tried to hide. Jim Hightower always talks about or always asks you the difference between the word naked and the word naked. And he says a person who is naked means a person who is running around without clothes. Naked is a person who is running around without clothes and is up to no good. And what you have here today is a naked attempt by the Republican Party to change the rules to let them continue to control this state when they see all across the state that Democrats are beginning to win in every part of the state, not just the urban areas, not just the suburban areas, but places that we could not even get close to, like Denton or Collin County or Fort Bend County, that they have lost control over. They have lost control over these jurisdictions because people, particularly people of color, have begun to vote. And they have been voting for Democrats. And Democrats have been elected. And Democrats have been elected to positions of leadership in the House. And you see them here today. And they have worked hard to make sure that the people of Texas have a voice, that they don't try to hide legislation that is important to Texans. They bring it to the front, they act as transparent, and they're working every single day to ensure that Texans get good government. Contrary to what you saw and have been seeing with this legislature in this session, and what you saw in these places like Fort Bend County and Harris County and Dallas County, days when the Republicans used to control. Today you have government that is every day trying to work for the people, and especially government that wants people to vote. Jesus, why is that such a big deal? Why is that such a big deal? We send our troops, people of color, Mexican Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, who today are being deprived the right to vote, to go fight for liberty all over the world. And these Republicans who control this Capitol right now want to deny them and their parents of that right to vote, and they are shameful for doing that. So, folks, let's not forget the bottom line of what this is all about. Don't listen to anything that the Republicans say when they say that people are clamoring for that. Because at the end of the day, a large majority of the people of this state do not want laws that restrict their right to vote. They want laws that makes it easier for them to vote. When they get out of work at 7 o'clock at night and they're tired, or 8 o'clock at night, they want to be able to go to a polling place to vote at their leisure, not have to hurry home and risk having an accident because they can't get to the polling place and early vote at 7 o'clock. They want an opportunity to go to a polling place close to where they're at. They want an opportunity to go to a large polling place where there's a lot of voters and they can see their friends and they can go together and exercise the most democratic thing that this country stands for, the right to vote. This is what the Republicans are trying to deprive voters of the state of Texas, and it is shameful. So, let your voice be heard. Make these people put some clothes on, right? So that they're not running around naked trying to deprive us of our rights. And let's get good government back in the state of Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman Hinojosa, and appreciate you and the Texas Democratic Party and your continuing support of all of our members and what we're fighting for. I want to just, before we take a few questions, briefly acknowledge and thank a couple House Democratic Caucus members who have joined us since we started, or at least since I was back up here. Representative Art Fierro, I see. Representative Claudia Ordaz Perez. I see Representative Gina Hinojosa, who's joined us. Representative Penny Mirage Shaw, and Representative Retta Bowers. So I hope I didn't miss anybody. I hope I recognize everyone. All right. So you have probably noticed by now we're all wearing these Good Trouble masks today as a tribute in part to Congressman John Lewis, one of the great American heroes who we lost recently. And House Democrats are going to do our best to try to stand on his shoulders and the shoulders of so many others who have fought long and hard and shed blood and tears and in many cases lost their lives in the pursuit of voting rights and equal rights and civil rights. And HB 6 and SB 7 are a all too real reminder that those struggles are not over. And until we forever end these attempts to suppress the vote and make it harder for people to vote and participate in the foundational element of our democracy, the right to vote, that fight continues. And that's what's going to happen today. We'll be happy to answer a few questions. Yes.
Jane Tim, NBC. Wondering if you guys think the businesses that spoke out are doing enough to stand in the way of the bills?
Sure, I'll welcome any of the members of Congress or anyone else who'd like to chime in on that. I think that we're very appreciative to the businesses who have spoken out, such as American Airlines, such as Dell Computers, two great Texas-based companies. In addition, this week there were a long list of other companies and business organizations who also spoke out very clearly and decisively against these vote suppression bills. So we appreciate that, and we thank them for that. And I think it's a reflection that the business community understands that it's not good for business to have their employees disenfranchised. It's not good for business to have their customers disenfranchised. And a robust democracy, when everyone has a fair chance to participate, lifts all boats and is good for Texas, it's good for the United States, and it's good for business. So we're appreciative of those businesses who've spoken out.
I'd love to know if you think it's enough, Congressman.
Yeah, Representative Turner's right. We appreciate the businesses in Texas, including the ones that he mentioned, that have spoken out against this voter suppression. To answer your question, no, I don't think it's enough. We need more. We need more of the business community who knows how damaging this is to the state, what a fundamental issue of fairness this is to our democracy. We need them to speak up. We don't need to go down the road of Georgia. We saw the economic backlash that Georgia has been facing with businesses pulling out of activity in Georgia. I suspect that if this legislation passes and the governor signs it in the not too distant future, that Texas is going to be facing the same kinds of things. So this is the time for the business community. If they haven't already, we need them to speak up with a strong and loud voice.
Julie Karen with KXAN. Texas across every county. Do you disagree with that, and why?
Well, that's their argument, but what they're trying to do is apply similar processes that disenfranchise voters and suppress voters across every county. Yes, they're trying to apply measures that make it harder for people to vote and harder for election workers to do their jobs. Yes, uniformly across the state, and that's why it'd be wrong in any county. It's wrong if it takes place in 254 counties, and that's what they're trying to do. That's what we're trying to stop.
The poll tax was on 254 counties. One voter suppression effort after another. No, I'm fine. He's doing great.
One more question? Yes.
Associated Press, how does this bill in Texas compare to what we're seeing in Georgia and Florida and other states? Would this make Texas more restrictive than even those states?
But so, I'll tell you, as a Texas representative, I've not studied closely bills in other states. So it's all we can do to keep track of the bills here. What I can tell you is SB 7 and HB 6 are wrong for Texas. Texas already has some of the most restrictive voter laws in the entire country, and moreover, Texas voter laws have been repeatedly found to be intentionally discriminatory. That's not me saying it. That's federal courts repeatedly saying it over and over again. Whether it's photo voter ID, whether it's the redistricting plans from the last decade, over and over again, federal courts have ruled that Texas Republicans acted not with discriminatory effect, they did, but with discriminatory intent. And we believe this is a continuation of that effort, and so we believe this is some of the very worst legislation in the entire United States.
Have you heard Republicans coming to your side and saying we are standing with you on this issue?
No, not yet. Thank you all very much.